What is the worst adult temper tantrum you have seen? I was driving down a street in Portland following about 5 car lengths behind a small pickup truck. The driver of that pickup started slamming his brakes on for no apparent reason. He kept doing it until he actually slammed them so hard that he slid to a complete stop in the middle of traffic. I was forced to stop behind him and was sitting there wondering if he had something wrong with his truck when he got out in a fury and ran back to my truck red-faced and screaming at me that I was tailgating him. I was completely baffled by this guy. I never tailgate people and I was a generous 5 car lengths behind him on the road. He completely lost his mind and was screaming so high-pitched and senseless that I could no longer understand anything that was coming out of his mouth. I really thought there was something mentally wrong with him, so I rolled my window down and said, "Take a deep breath, man. You're going to have a heart attack." That just made him go more crazy. I've never heard a human voice make such crazy sounds. I wish I had a video camera. So after a minute or so I just pulled over on a side street to try to make sense of everything and let traffic go. He stood right there in the street and screamed and wailed his arms all over for 4 more minutes as cars went around him. As I was sitting there, a car pulled over in front of me and a guy got out, walked over to my car and said, "Did that guy slam the brakes on in front of you?" I said, "Yeah, I have no idea what's wrong with him." The guy says, "He's done it to me twice and I've called the police on him both times." I just called them right now. So both of us sat there until the police arrived, about 2 more minutes, with the guy screaming and throwing a temper tantrum the entire time. The cops had to tase the guy to get him to stop his tantrum. He got arrested and his truck got towed. It was a bizarre and terrible experience. One of the cops told me they had received over 50 calls on the guy and they had arrested him 5 times already. I was at my local comic book store a few months ago. I was browsing and picking up some new books. While I was browsing, a middle-aged woman and a senior gentleman were shopping there together. The senior man, presumably her father, kept saying the comic books were expensive here and that she can only pick a certain number. The middle-aged woman started to tantrum in the middle of the store saying, "I warned you this was going to be an expensive week. I need all the issues so I don't fall behind. I told you to save money for this. I need them." The man kept saying, "No, they are expensive. Pick a couple and we're leaving," and the woman kept sobbing, screaming and stomping her feet saying, "I told you to save money. I need them all. I told you they were expensive," over and over. I couldn't believe my eyes. I worked at a grocery store on Boylston St. During the Boston Marathon bombings. Store was closed for an entire week, as the street was considered a crime scene. The day before we reopened, we were then, and finally then, allowed to enter the store to get rid of the thousands and thousands of dollars of spoiled food. Due to the store being shut and the power being cut, we had hardly any perishable food. We got some things from another store, I believe, because, you know, crime scene. Cue woman freaking out for far too long about us not having the salad she wanted, the pre-made crap butt salad, yelling about us having poor customer service, about how we can't do our jobs, that we're obviously being overpaid for our lack of effort at our jobs. She told someone to go back to school. Cue my manager basically saying there were bombings a week ago. People died. Your salad is irrelevant. Woman goes red, obviously forgetting she was on the street of the crime scene and we had a more than reasonable excuse for lack of products. Shamefully, woman leaves. Customers cheer. Many years ago, when my sister and I were in high school, our dad was driving us home from the mall and stopped at Subway to get our mom a sandwich. It was a really nice day out, so my sister and I rolled down the windows and chatted while we waited for dad to come out. All of a sudden the Subway door flies open and this lady comes storming out with her boyfriend in tow, ranting about they can't treat you like that and generally acting unhinged while her boyfriend tried to calm her down. I really wanted to make a snide comment about it to my sister, but they were standing like 5 feet from our car. The windows were rolled down, and I was afraid this lady would attack me if she heard me say it. A couple of minutes later dad comes out with mom's sandwich. I ask him what that was all about, and he says that the cashier had politely asked the boyfriend to stop swearing as there were children in the room, and the lady had flipped out and started screaming and breaking things. When I worked at Panera Bread, this lady kept trying to get her food for free by saying that she was given the wrong order the night before but didn't have any evidence to back it up. After a co-worker explains that we need evidence, she proceeds to call him a monkey butt N-word even though she was black and repeats it over and over again until we kick her out. This happened on my first day. Safe to say I was given a pretty good impression of the place. I love when crap happens. We had a lady just like that at Pizza Hut, except she would try to return the pizza half eaten and expect a refund. We finally blacklisted that bee. Work retail for a month and you'll see some great ones. Had a guy bring back a printer after having it for a year. No receipt of course. It stopped working. I get it, printers suck. I'll talk to my manager and maybe we can at least get you store credit. Not good enough, full refund. Can't do it. He briskly walks out of the store, leaving the printer on the counter and me thinking, well, that was easy. Wrong. He's charging back into the store. Automatic doors don't even have time to open fully. His shoulder busts it off its hinge. With a hammer in hand and knuckles bulging white from his death grip, he stops in front of the printer and with a look that says really nothing you can do just begins to smash it to bits. End of story. Epilogue. I worked at that store for 3 years and one day, a few months before I quit, he strolled in to buy a new printer, some ink, and the warranty. Only took him a few years, but he finally got a new printer. The fact that he had a hammer readily accessible tells me that his behavior was premeditated. Fitness center. Our lifeguard it has a huge aquatic area with a slide. When the pool is busy we rove, and one of the stations is just under the stairs to the top of the slide. You have to be like 4 feet tall to ride because the kids don't often realize it's actually pretty deep in the splash well, and when they can't touch the bottom they just stand there and drown. Anyways, I turned some 5-year-old away because he isn't tall enough. Simple. Those are the rules. His mom comes over and screams at me for not letting her kid ride the slide. I apologize and say rules are rules, that they are implemented for her child's safety. She huffs off and drags her kid with her. Sometime later I'm at the final station on our rotation. The kid somehow snuck up and goes down the slide. Not surprisingly, he can't walk on the bottom, and the current from the slide keeps him from paddling over to the wall. So he's underwater and flailing and slowly dying. Of course I jump in and make the save. When I bring him to his mother and I'm filling out the incident report, she starts berating me on how I'll let her kid drown and that she can't believe the guards are so irresponsible. When I ask her to sign the incident report, she goes ballistic. Had to get the pool manager to come over and she had to leave the pool with her kid, who obviously wanted to stay. Took all my self-control not to smack that hypocritical bee with my guard tube. I was at GameStop looking around when a guy probably between 40 and 50 came in wanting a refund on a game he had. The employees told him they couldn't take it back since it was scratched up and cracked. The guy proceeded to yell at them and how they are failures in life and he demands a refund and they must give it to him. He even threw the case of the game at them. He was quickly kicked out. Oh man. The things you see working at a pharmacy. People are entitled to their time. I understand. But when I tell you we ran your prescription through the insurance and it saved you money so your copay is $11, please do not rage at me for the price. That's not my fault. And if I had 5 other customers in line before you, don't rant that you waited 5 whole minutes at the drive-thru and waste even more time. I apologize and empathetically respond, but that's just not enough sometimes. People make me question why they live so angrily. I've witnessed a number of parents having meltdowns at Disney World and yelling at their children for being, gasp, children. If your toddler is a bit cranky at 10 PM from you dragging them around a park for 12 hours for the 5th day in a row to the point where you as the adult can't keep yourself together, you're vacationing wrong. Throwing a tantrum at your 3 years old who is up way past their bedtime is not going to turn their behavior into that of a well-rested mature adult. Not seen but heard of. My boyfriend's brother is getting a free ride through university since their grandparents had paid for my BF's education and would do the same for his brother. He screamed and threw a tantrum about not having enough money for residency since he wanted to leave their mom's house, how he wanted his independence, and that he needed the money or he was going to quit school. His grandparents caved since it seemed super important that he have the money he was asking for, and his selfish brother spent it on a $5,000 trip to the Dominican, paid for his girlfriend's ticket and expenses, blew all of the money he had been given, Turns out he lied that he needed the money, wasn't even remotely considering moving out of his mom's house, and only wanted money he could spend on his own terms. Now he's slowly stirring up the pot again, complaining about how apparently broke he is, and the new lie is how he's in jeopardy of not paying for his tuition. Education is seen as a must in their family. His grandparents are sticklers and think if you don't have a degree you're worth nothing. So they fall into this trap repeatedly because they think he'll become a homeless M-head if they let him fail and learn the valuable lesson of not taking advantage of people. Sounds like he is going to become a homeless M-head anyway. Your grandparents should save themselves a few $1,000s long term. I work at a golf shop that also has a large driving range for customers to try out products and hit balls. We sell tokens or punch cards for the range. The punch cards are sold for 25 or 50 tokens. So, we have a guy that comes in with his son, somewhere between 10 and 12, with his half-used 50 token punch card. This is a synopsis of what I overheard between the customer, C, and one of our assistant managers, B. C. Hi, so we're moving out of town and I was wondering if we could get our money back for the rest of these tokens. B. Well, I'm sorry sir, but the punch cards are non-refundable. You could give them to a friend or family member. C. What do you mean I can't return this? I bought it. Can't you give me store credit or something? B. Repeats earlier statement. If it weren't used I would gladly return it. C. This is freaking ridiculous. I've already given you guys the money, so why can't you just put it on my account? B. Can you relate to anything that I'm saying? C. No, I don't understand. B. It's like if you bought an airline ticket and you missed your flight, the airline isn't going to refund your ticket when it was your mistake. Basically my coworker repeated the same things for like 10 minutes to this guy while he's setting a terrible example for his kid and being obnoxiously loud. Literally the whole store was watching. Eventually one of the guys in corporate made my coworker give him the store credit. What's the point of store policies if we don't enforce them? TLDR. A customer got mad. Because people who work in corporate are generally tools who have never actually worked on the front lines, and if that customer was shouting at them, would act like a complete B. Not standing up for your workers is crap management and a great way to lose talented employees. My boss lost her crap on a waitress because she ordered wine and it came in one of those new trendy stemless glasses. Refused to drink wine out of a glass without a stem. The restaurant had only one kind of wine glass. We left without eating. Sounds like a nice person to work for. I was working at a really nice restaurant one Valentine's Day, waitressing, and this couple came in saying it was their anniversary. The woman was really nice and telling me all about how they had their first date at this restaurant and they come every year on Valentine's Day and order the exact same thing they had on their first date. They had some wine and cocktails, and when they went to order their special meal I went to go put in their order and chef told me we were out of the porterhouse steak. It was later into the night and they'd all been ordered already. I went back to the table to tell them I was sorry we were out of the steak, but if they'd like to order something else I'd give them each a free dessert. All of a sudden this woman went from being so sweet to total meltdown mode. She started crying, like sobbing, and she was shaking and stomping her feet. Then she stood up and started literally screaming, saying that we ruined her anniversary and how could we do this to her on her special day, blah blah. Then she started in on her husband, calling him a piece of crap butthole for being late, and started degrading him, saying she wished she'd never married him anyway and what a terrible husband he was. We finally got her to calm down and order something else, and I swear the whole rest of her meal she was just getting drunk and was switching between either crying with her head down on the table or snarling at her husband. It was the worst temper tantrum I've ever seen by a woman old enough to be my mom, over a porterhouse steak, lol. And I felt so bad for her husband. He seemed totally abused and miserable. The whole thing was just bizarre. I used to work at Logan Airport during the whole liquid ban. I told some guy he couldn't bring his soda through security. He proceeds to go on a giant tirade against government interference and that I was somehow personally responsible for taking all his freedoms away. He then proceeded to yell that he had a bomb. He was swiftly tackled. Well, that was a wrong answer. His chances of getting on the plane dive bombed. My wife and I were on our way back from our honeymoon in Hawaii when we saw a double tantrum at the airport. An older, 60s, man threw a tantrum, grumbling, arguing etc. when sir had the audacity to make him take off his shoes and patted him down. After getting through security, his wife was so traumatized that she broke down sobbing and said, "You're ruining the whole vacation," then continued to cry for the next 15 minutes while her husband sat next to her with a kill me expression on his face. Of course, my wife and I say you're ruining the whole to this day. Humorously, of course. Witnessing other people's tantrums and using them as an inside joke afterwards is one of my favorite pastimes. A girl I used to work with got a surprise gift from her mom, which was a brand new vehicle. She went outside to look at it and came stomping back in because she bought a standard. She ended up swearing and brutally cutting down her mom in front of everyone. I was in Hong Kong and late for a flight to Thailand. There was a guy at the gate desk banging on the desk and demanding that he get on a flight to Thailand, or else. Me and my travel friend were also late, but didn't care. We ended up on a flight to Thailand through Emirates Airlines and sweet assed first class and a 90% empty airplane. Dickface yellow McBang, the desk didn't make the cut. I remember because it was one of the only times I cried in front of my dad. In my town, you had to be 13 to referee young U8 and U9 rec soccer, but since my brother had done it for so long they allowed me to take the referee class at 12 and I passed it. After a 24-hour class, on my second day on the job, I was reffing a U8 rec game. The girls in this game had no coordination and the purpose was to get them accustomed to the rules and play style of soccer. Anyway, I apparently made a call a father of one of the girls disagreed with, and he started pestering me for the entirety of the game. After the game he kept berating me all the way into the parking lot while I, 12 years old, tried to be professional and keep my head down until I reached my dad's car. When I got into my car he kind of stopped and went to get his daughter. My dad, who happened to be the chief investigator for the Department of Criminal Justice in New Jersey, saw I was visibly shaken up and he asked me what was wrong. I just broke down, completely terrified over how a grown man just treated me. My dad got out of the car and chased him down. I couldn't see what happened from where I was in the passenger's seat, but I heard my dad yell, then the jerk-off parent, then my dad again. Then I heard silence. My dad walked back to the car and said he'd never bother me again, and was proud I was willing to take on a paying job so early in my life. My tears cleared up immediately. I've never been so happy to have such a badass as a dad, and I also learned a lesson on how to deal with narcissistic jerk-offs. I continued to ref another 7 years and worked my way up to where I was earning over $100 per game reffing tournaments with college scouts. I'm glad I stuck with it, but there are some parents out there who go on serious power trips over their children's sports. I'm glad my dad stood up for me that day, or I'd have never learned how to stand up for myself later on. I work hotel front desk. I have a ton of stories, but here's a few of the more memorable ones. A guest committed suicide in one of our rooms, and for various reasons we cancelled the manager's reception we usually held that evening. It was disrespectful, the managers were otherwise occupied, etc. Anyway, one special snowflake guest came down to the desk the next morning absolutely livid. She was upset her children had to witness police activity at the hotel. She was upset the manager's reception, aka free beer and wine, had been cancelled and demanded a refund for a free amenity. She also was upset that we would not comp her entire stay for everything she endured. Frankly, we were all shaken by the guest's suicide and refused to give the snowflake anything. Cue stomping her feet and throwing a water bottle at the front desk agent trying to help her. She did all this in front of her children. Mid-level manager for a large healthcare company demanded an upgrade to a suite because don't you know who I am? In front of the Beach Boys, who were checking in during their tour and had reserved the suite in question. Dance convention. Had a dance mom upset we wouldn't give her a late checkout on the last day of the convention. Checkout is noon. She wanted 5 PM. We were like, we can do 12:30. She had her daughter come to the desk and beg us, with tears in her eyes, for a late checkout. When that didn't work, she screamed "Yell are motherfucking racists" in the middle of our crowded lobby, full of children. The agent helping her was Hispanic, and the manager was black. My freshman Chem 101 prof threw a temperature tantrum at the beginning of class once. We had just taken the last exam before the final. and a lot of people bombed it because he put a lot of information on there that wasn't covered in lecture or the textbook. Since it was near the end of the year, this was also the time all the profs were reminding everyone to review them on Rate My Professor. Many students, myself included, rated him badly because he tested us on info from physics and organic chem in a 101 class. He also liked to make derogatory remarks and individually mock students in front of 300 other people. He was a major butthole. The first class after yes grades were released, he just lost it, calling us all entitled, lazy, whiny, etc. Said none of us deserved to be in the university, one of the best in the state. We were worthless people who would amount to nothing in life, and that he would even try to contest some students' enrollment. He had a pretty loud voice and never used a mic, so he was screaming at the top of his lungs. Then we found out why he was so mad. His mom regularly checked his Rate My Professor page and called him the night before and asked, "What are you doing to those poor kids to make them say those things? Why do they hate you so much?" He was mad because his mom called him out on being a total crap bag, and he decided to take it out on us. By the end of the year, he had said enough crap, specifically about disabled and mentally ill students, that many of us were thinking about reporting him and trying to get him fired. He ended up getting seriously reprimanded. He's only allowed to teach one class now. Sucks to be you, Doc Collins. You were a little whiny little bee. God, so many stories from my retail days. I got to watch a former NFL player, one who was actually fairly well known in the late 90s, freak out and throw a tantrum in the middle of Best Buy when he didn't want to wait in line, which was 2 people long. Yelled for a manager until one came up, screamed at the manager about how his time was too valuable to be wasted waiting in line, pulled the "Do you know who I am" card, and started screaming again when the manager told him that we weren't going to do anything to compensate him for the problem. The incident ended with him gathering up his posse of children, screaming that we'd be hearing from his lawyer, and leaving. Also that he could go around 2 people. Then, a couple years later, he was arrested for snorting see-off of a toilet in a nightclub. So, that explains a lot. Worked at a very small niche magazine publishing company as an editorial assistant during college. My editor was the sweetest, most polite, middle-aged gentleman I'd ever met. We all got along great and he really was a joy to work for. He reminded me of Mr. Rogers with a southern drawl. Once, the day before an issue was headed to press, our publisher changed the entire focus of the issue, requiring a significant rework and an all-nighter by this editor and a few others. He tried to stay quiet and just sit there brooding, but old Mr. Rogers lost it. He stood up and kicked his plastic trash bin across the office and then, swearing the whole time, walked up to the publisher's desk. He didn't have an office, we were all in his same room, and used his hands to knock every single thing off his desk. No one even said anything, we all just watched in horror amusement. He ended up taking a walk to cool off and everything blew over, but we never let him forget about it. Hey, most other retail work is probably just as bad as pharmacy. Once had a dude try to return an electric beard trimmer through the pharmacy drive-thru during peak business hours. Like, excuse me sir, this is not Burger King. You cannot have it your way. I was about 11 or 12 when gas prices were higher than $2 a gallon. Saw 2 women almost exchange fisticuffs over who could get to the gas pump first when prices were low at one gas station. I had never seen anyone do more than complain that prices went up. Yeah, I know. First world problem. Maybe it was a flashback to the gas shortage of the 1970s, because they were definitely old enough to have experienced it, and definitely old enough to know they should just take turns. A guy, his wife, and a baby come into the restaurant I was working in. They ordered 2 Don Julio margaritas. Okay, no problem boss. They order 2 more. Their server has to leave for the day, so they transfer the table to another server, and at that point they order the $1 special margaritas. Sure, check time comes, and they say they never ordered the Don Julio ones. Their server informed me before she left for the day that they kind of rubbed her the wrong way, and to keep an eye on them, that server speak for this guy's gonna be a problem, giving you a heads up. I call her and ask her how he ordered the margaritas. She confirmed he specified, etc. So I told the guy he had to pay for them. I was the bartender and the mod. He didn't like that, so he threw down a $100 bill and I walked away to get his change. When I came back he was cussing me out, called me a B, yelled to the entire restaurant that we were ripping him off. His wife picked up the baby and called me a B. He called me a prison guard, and I told them to please leave the premises. He called back later and said I was rude, cursed him out, that he was a doctor, and that he was going to sue me. Still waiting to get called into court on that one. TL. DR. Grown butt man gets ousted by a 5-foot tall bartender, but with calm composure instead of fisticuffs. This happened to a friend. She had cut someone off while driving to work in the morning, didn't think twice about it. About 10 minutes later when waiting to make a left turn onto a busy street off a side street, she noticed in her rearview mirror that the car she had cut off had followed her and stopped behind her while she was stuck waiting for traffic to let her turn. Beefy, tatted guy got out of his car with a knife, shaking his head in anger. He sliced both her back tires, got back in his car and drove off. I really want a big neon sign in the back of my car that says sorry connected to a button on my dash. That might just pee people off even more though. This is pretty minor compared to what I've read here, but I want to share this story anyway. Was flying to Washington DC from Tampa, Florida, and the line through security was unusually long. I had left the house late, so I figured this was my punishment and didn't think much of it when my flight left while I was still in line. When I strolled over to the gate there was an oldish woman and her husband there, and she was pretty peeved that they got left behind because security took so long. The attendants were as kind as possible and tried to put them on the next flight, but this lady was just livid that the security line was what made her late. I eventually lost my patience with her and reminded her that they weren't going to turn the plane around to pick up a handful of people who should have planned better, and the only thing we could do was relax and wait for the next flight. When I got to the attendants I admitted I should have left sooner and it would be nice to be on the next flight, but if there was no room I was okay with being on the one after that. I ended up in first class, and the look on the old lady's face when she boarded the plane to see me sipping some soda in a row by myself was absolutely priceless. And yes, I did rub it in a little by saying it pays to be nice to people. Was vacationing in Banff while there were US forest fires happening. This unfortunately caused smoke to obscure a lot of the view. Lady was yelling at the girl working the motel desk about why this was happening. Absolutely unreal. She seemed to have no control over herself, yet expected the worker to control the weather. I was working the graveyard at a gas station and two guys walk in. Well, one decided to try and be slick and grab a pack of smokes and run. Unbeknownst to him, one door was locked and he runs straight into it, which obviously alerted me to what was going on. I come out to find him out cold on the floor. His buddy meanwhile decides to berate me for not leaving the other door unlocked. Goes completely batshit. Throws ice all over the place. Proceeds to throw icy cups full of Pepsi Freeze all over the floor. And smashes 2 of my bottles of Grey Goose. Finally he pauses and asks, "You're not gonna call the cops, are you?" To which I said, "Of course not. Look outside. We were a substation." And his face just drops. 2 county cruisers rolled in mid-tantrum after I hit the panic button. His tantrum cost us several thousand in property and damaged goods. But seeing him and his buddy get cuffed and the satisfaction I felt that night, priceless. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.